Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of What's the Tea, where we talk about what's hot and what's boiling over in the land of politics and pop culture and all things fun. My name is Laura Martin. I'm the executive director of the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada and Plan Action. And I'm here with our organizing director,
Erika Castro.
Yay! And today, we seem happy, but today we are talking about our new president's executive orders and the impacts they will have on the immigrant community. Now, Erica, we are two people of color, but we are not lawyers.
Yes.
So this is not legal advice. This is us giving information that's out there in a condensed and fun form called What's the Tea? Sound good? All right. So you ready to get started?
Let's do this. There's a lot to cover.
There is a lot to cover. And I think people should remember, too, an executive order isn't a policy, isn't a law. It's a promise. As we've seen executive orders from President Obama and President Biden go nowhere, these are also just pieces of paper that Trump signed. So it could change. We know our friends like the ACLU will be suing. Other groups like the National Immigration Law Center will sue. And so some of these things may not come to fruition, but we do think it's important for people to know kind of what is happening. Yeah, makes sense?
No, exactly. I think it's important, like you said, to remember that executive orders don't change laws. They don't change the Constitution. So it's important to know what's happening and what the president is signing, but we're hoping that our laws will prevail.
Yeah. So if you go on the website, the White House website under issues, there are some topics. And so we're going to go through some of the topics and then what some of those executive orders kind of mean. Of course, I'm going to ask you about it. I'm not expecting you to know from A to Z all the different ways, because I would never ask you to jump into the mind of Donald Trump and what things mean or why they're doing it. But to get us started, one of the points on his website is clarifying the military's role in protecting the territorial integrity of the United States. So what is he talking about?
I think that one kind of boils down to bringing more military to the border. We're seeing a lot of pushback on making sure that we have a secure border and whatnot. So this really just opens the door for them to be able to deploy military personnel to the border. Part of that is going to be impacting a lot of refugees, asylum folks that are coming to the border to seek asylum. Because reminder, seeking asylum is legal in the United States. And by seeking asylum, all you got to do is go to one of the ports of entries, and that's the border. So this will deploy more militarization to the border.
And who's going to pay for that?
Exactly. And we already know, even like with his, his wall, he didn't have enough money to pay for that. I think the thing that we have to remember here is that things like this is going to cost a lot of money, especially in a moment where people are talking about the cost of groceries, the cost of utilities. Like, that's what people want to see, not a blown up military budget just to terrorize immigrants and refugees.
Yeah. So one of the next points on his website is designating cartels and other organizations as foreign terrorist organizations and specially designated global terrorists.
Yeah. So this executive order refers to the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, which was a wartime authority. Under this act, the president may deport or detain folks who are natives to the state or to the country, and also citizens of an enemy nation. So this is concerning, obviously, because it could potentially be targeting a lot of our communities and stuff. But the administration could use the database or the dated statute to justify targeting specific community members, those providing with no hearing, and then also just based solely on where they were born, where their citizenship is from.
So he could say, if you are a native to or a citizen of, let's say, Palestine, and you're involved in activities like protesting the war, he could call you a terrorist and deport you.
Exactly. And we've already seen, there's been a lot of youth have been speaking out to try to support and stop what's happening in Gaza. So this could be a target for that for sure.
Yeah, we have to remember it's not just Latinos or Mexicans. it's not white people. Basically, I don't need to watch their back because no one's talking about the Canadian border, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So protecting the American people against mass invasion.
I mean, that's really just focused on his mass deportation plans. It removes existing enforcement priorities. We know that every administration has priorities on who they're going to try to deport and enforce, deportations around. Oftentimes, those are folks who have some kind of criminal record or have already had orders of deportation, stuff like that. But basically, under this administration, they're saying anybody that's in the country illegally is considered a criminal and should be deported.
And that's a flag for me because I think the term criminal is subjective and it depends on the jurisdiction. Like from state to state, it's different. You could be considered a criminal if you jaywalk in some states.
Exactly. And I think this makes it a little bit scarier too with the Lake and Riley Act, because somebody could just be accused of stealing something. One of the things we're talking about is the cost of living and people not being able to make ends meet. What if there's some single mom that's trying to get diapers for her kid, and now she doesn't have any due process because of a bill like that, and that helps facilitate her deportation. So,
yeah, I mean, I know our TikTok usage is waning, but how many TikTok videos have you seen of Karens, saying somebody stole or they're following somebody in a store because they think they stole and they didn't do anything?
Exactly. I was talking to somebody earlier, and I was mentioning, like, we've all been racially profiled if you're a person of color. I remember the first time it happened to me, I was at I think it was a Walgreens or a CVS across the street from my house. And I was like 9 or 10 years old. And the security guard stopped me as I was leaving because he thought that I had stole something. He made me like empty my pockets and stuff, held me there for a few minutes, and then saw I had nothing. And I was able to go. But with a bill like the Lake and Riley Act, he, if that would have been a thing back in the day, he could have arrested me, detained me, and now I have no due process.
Side note, you know what we used to do as kids when we were being racially profiled? There was a Circle K near our bus stop. We used to get off the bus and walk home, and there's a Circle K. And we would go in there like all of the not white kids, and they'd be watching us. And then our white friends would steal candy. So use racism for your favor. What kind of resources and infrastructure would that need for the mass deportations?
I mean, it's going to need a lot of money. It's going to need a lot of personnel, and it is also going to need space. I think the other thing to remember from this particular order is that it also restricts temporary protective status, or TPS, as some of us know it, and other parole programs. And over the last few years, even though we haven't, been able to get comprehensive immigration reform, we have been able to help protect folks with TPS, with DACA, expand parole programs. So this threatens a lot of those programs. And it puts a lot of those people in jeopardy because now they're kind of stuck in limbo.
Yeah, and they're also going to have to hire Border Patrol agents, ICE agents. So what's that song? Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be ICE agents. I would find another job to do.
I've never heard of that song, actually.
Well, it's actually, the song actually goes, Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys.
Okay.
I changed it to ICE agents.
It's a good one.
Can you talk a little bit about, there's also a heading called Securing Our Border. They ended the CBP One app. What did that do?
So the CBP app was helping people who were seeking asylum or refuge in the States be able to track their case, and then also get information on when their appointments were coming up and stuff. But they were still most of them in Mexico, waiting for those appointments. So then what ended up happening when this order came through is the app went down. So then people didn't have any information about their cases. They didn't know if their appointments were still going to be upheld or what that meant. So it causes a lot of chaos. And I think this goes back to what they're trying to do. They're just trying to create a lot of chaos to make it seem that we have this huge issue at the border. But what's causing the big issue is the way that they're treating people and the continued backlash that they're creating.
Yeah, it's a manufactured crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And I also wanted to bring up too, asylum is legal. I would argue asylum is how this country was formed by opening up our hands to people from all over the world. Didn't go so well in the beginning stages, right, with the colonizers, but, refugees from the Holocaust, refugees from these wars and that war. So we know people like from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela. They're losing some of their status and ability to seek refuge in the United States. We've also abandoned people from Afghanistan and Ukraine. We know there's obviously, hopefully people know there's wars going on over there. And then ending the program ends the pathway for people to flee danger, some of which we kind of have a role in causing, but now they have no help, but we're kind of going back on our word as as the United States of America.
Exactly. It causes a lot of disruptions on the border. I think a lot of confusion too with people that don't know where the process is for them. And we don't know how long it's going to take for the administration to actually give those folks answers.
Yeah, it's tough. This is still going into some refugee resettlement. And so realigning the United States refugee admissions program. So suspending refugee resettlement.
Correct. Yeah. So the Trump is suspending the refugee admissions into the U.S. indefinitely, but is subject to review every 90 days. So that's heartbreaking for a lot of people that are coming to this country trying to find a better home. I mean, we saw that when the war in Ukraine broke, right? We saw a lot of people trying to migrate here, finding, some safety. But right now, he's really just getting rid of that program and that process for folks.
Yeah, it's devastating. So the next topic, declaring a national emergency at the southern border of the United States. Whoa.
I mean, I think this goes back to the chaos that they're trying to continue to push. Basically saying there's an emergency at the southern border, so it would deploy Department of Defense personnel to enhance border security. It also involves erecting barriers and using drones for surveillance. The other thing is the border wall construction. He's coming back to that. Do we really need a wall when people can't afford groceries? When he's cutting on social safety net programs. So I know that he wants to accelerate some of those efforts and then also divert military funding with congressional approval. So we'll see, because he tends to overstep a lot in those spaces.
Yeah, I mean, Congress has the power of the purse, not the president. And so again, he's just ignoring the Constitution.
And this goes back to executive orders don't just change the law. And that's where we need a lot of our elected officials to really step up and make sure that they're holding him accountable. That's why we have the 3 branches of government.
Yeah.
I think the other thing to also take into account is the fiscal impacts and then the environmental concerns. We're an environmental justice organization as well. So we know that building a wall is going to dismantle a lot of the ecosystem there. It's going to impact a lot of the species there, and also just community members that are used to kind of living on the border and bouncing from, one side to the other, because maybe they have dual citizenship or they have family members that are on the other side. So it's also going to disrupt a lot of the communities there.
Yeah, a lot of the way of life. Mm-hmm. So this one it kind of makes me think of, like, I didn't ask for your help, but guaranteeing the state's protection against invasion. Invasion of what? The little guys at Area 51?
That's the thing that I think is confusing right now. They keep saying there's an invasion. They keep saying there's all these criminals. But then we're also seeing them trying to do enforcement at schools, at churches, right? At hospitals. Why rescind programs that protect people who are vulnerable in those kinds of situations when you're saying that you have an invasion of all of these criminals? So I think they kind of contradict themselves too in what they're trying to actually do. Because what ends up happening in many situations when things like this happen, it's eroding trust from the general public. They're not going to want to call law enforcement if they see a crime happening. Mm-hmm. If they are victims of crime, they're not going to want to call law enforcement. And that puts all of us at risk.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just playing into a deeply racist ideology that somehow there being more brown people is bad or is something wrong. I think it's just like the natural order of things. It's not necessarily because of any border policy. But I think that just the idea that the president would say we're being invaded, no one can look at me and know where I was born or what my ethnicity is.
Exactly.
So it's like, are people like me now going to be open to hate crimes? Are we going to be profiled more?
Yeah.
Or like I just read a news article in the New York Times, a Puerto Rican family was at a restaurant speaking Spanish where ICE officers happened to be, and they arrested them.
Yeah.
Puerto Ricans are United States citizens. And last time I checked, you're allowed to speak Spanish if you freaking want to.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it was her mom, and then their baby who were detained for that. Yeah. And that's some of the concerns. I think with some of the restrictions that this one specifically brought up is the effectively restricts asylum. So to remain in Mexico participants only, and then complete suspension of entry through the southern border. So again, that just continues to create this manufactured chaos at the border when instead they actually just need to make sure that they're upholding our laws, which is asylum and refugee laws to help people. Some of the legal concerns that we've heard are that it violates asylum laws that were established by Congress in 1980s.
So before I was born, so it's old.
So folks are considering this to be unconstitutional, and it also contradicts the existing legal framework for asylum seekers.
Yeah. So he not only did he have his own executive orders, he's also undoing previous ones. So it's called a rescission of harmful executive orders and actions. So what are some of those? I know some of them are Biden's.
Yeah, one of them is, I think many of us remember the first time Trump was in office, he had kids in cages. So there was a lot of families that lost contact from their kids, their parents, all of that. So the Biden administration put together a family reunification task force. And one of the executive orders was to eliminate that program. The task force had successfully reunited over 800 families that were separated under the Trump administration. Some of the concerns from that is that it signals a potential return to family separation, or even just continuing to deport families as a whole, or putting them in detention centers as a whole, which is sad because, again, their whole idea is that, they're only going after criminals and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, no, you're putting children in these states.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any ones that you think we missed or anything else that you wanted to before we end?
I think the other thing I would just mention is his rescission of the sensitive locations memo. We know that every administration, decides what priority enforcements are like and stuff. And under the Obama administration, there was the sensitive locations memo basically stating that there isn't any enforcement allowed in churches, schools, hospitals, and the Trump administration rescinded it last time they were in office. Biden brought it back up, but it's been removed again. So that is one of the reasons why we're also hearing a lot of concerns from teachers, parents that are worried about whether they should send their kids to school or not, people worried if they can go to church and stuff like that. So I think that's another one that was really important to help protect people, especially in vulnerable situations, that was rescinded. But I think the important thing to remember is that we can protect ourselves if we know our rights, right? If we know how to respond when we have any kind of interaction with ICE, if we are prepared, we, had legal screenings, things like that. I think that all of those things are going to be good steps to be prepared in case anything happens.
Yeah, an organized community is a safe community. And I don't know this man's name, but he's the border czar. He was on television whining, saying ICE is having a hard time doing their job in places like Chicago because the people know their rights. They know not to answer the door, not to answer questions. And so that's organizing. That's doing these trainings, passing around the information on social media. People may not interact with your social media posts, but they see it. So if you're sharing the ACLU of Nevada, the National Immigrant Law Center, if you're sharing their Know Your Rights information, people who need it will be able to see that and be able to protect themselves too.
Exactly. That's the best way that we can protect ourselves from this moment.
Make the border czar cry.
Yes. Like you said, he's complaining. He's talking about oh, these organizations are teaching people their rights. Yeah, because per the Constitution, even if we're undocumented, we do have rights.
Yeah. So I can't remember what article I was reading, but Stephen Horsford has quoted how he's like working with immigration groups, which is great. But he and other members of Congress did not work with immigration groups when he voted for the Laken Riley Act. Now that's a cool, I'm glad he shouted out immigration groups. Maybe he's not talking about us. Maybe he's talking about something else. But why do we have beef with the Laken Riley Act? I mean, all of the Democrats voted for it. Yeah. All the Nevada Democrats voted for it.
I mean, I think our biggest concern with it is the way that it does away with due process. It also doesn't mean, that you were convicted by one of these crimes. It's simply if you were, I'm forgetting the word now.
Accused?
If you were accused of a crime. If you were accused of a crime, you can be arrested and detained indefinitely with no bail. Because it gets away because it does away with due process. And I think that's the biggest concern there. I understand that their narrative is around, this is for public safety and whatnot. But things like this, I think, go back to the way that our communities are often racially profiled. And our communities oftentimes don't have, especially if you're in immigration court, you don't have the opportunity to have an attorney all of the time. So this really impacts a lot of the rights that we have. So it's scary, not gonna lie.
It is, and it's also no balance because what happened to Laken Riley is disgusting, is horrific. Yes. The person who did it is a piece of trash. Mm-hmm. But then I was reading or watching, I think 8 News Now, mm-hmm. 2 women lured a man actually from Venezuela into a hotel room, shot and robbed him. They only got a 10-year sentence. They murdered him. Wow. So it's like deportation is a life sentence. You can't reapply for citizenship if you have a deportation on your record. If you commit crimes, you deserve the punishment. But crimes are not unique to people who aren't U.S. citizens. U.S. citizens commit crime all the time, and we see 10-year sentence or a suspended sentence. And it's not because of your citizenship status. It should be based on the crime.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like a double punishment all of the time when you're undocumented. Because even if you do pay the time through the criminal justice system, oftentimes you end up getting deported anyways.
Do you have any, this is kind of off topic, but do you have any ideas of why all the Dems voted for it? Like why? Because we were calling, other people were calling. I know the ACLU was sitting in calls, Make the Road, national partners, but they all still voted yes.
Yeah. I mean, I want to know who's in their ear, who were the lobbyists on the Hill that were saying this was good policy, because I don't understand it. I think the other thing, too, is just coming out of the election, we're seeing a lot of Democrats kind of moving more to the right when it comes to immigration. They feel that this is what people want. But I think they're not really understanding that what people really want is a pathway to citizenship and to be treated with dignity. It's like you said, there's higher rates of crime committed by everyday Americans, citizens, versus people who are undocumented. And that has to do with the fact that we know that as undocumented people, anything can get you deported and separated from your family. So people are very cautious about, getting into trouble. Those are conversations that we're having as, family with friends and stuff. It's like, drive safe, hold the wheel with both of your hands, like all of the things. And it's just like, be very cautious. So I think Dems at this moment are making a calculated move, and they feel that maybe moving more to the right is going to help them with re-election or to gain more support, or maybe just being closer to Republicans. They feel that they could do something, in a bipartisan way. But I think the thing that they need to remember is that it was our communities who get them elected. It's our communities who send them to put real solutions forward, like lowering the cost of living, whether it's housing, whether it's utilities, whether it's groceries, and not creating policies or going along with the Trump administration that's actually only going to make groceries more expensive or spending money in ways that is wasteful, just terrorizing families.
Yeah. I still can't believe it. But Anyways, moving on. Was there a raid in Reno this week?
No, there hasn't been any mass sweeps that we've heard in Nevada across the state. I think there has been maybe some targeted actions. I know we heard from Make the Road. There was some targeted enforcement in Winnemucca, but we haven't confirmed any mass raids. I think the thing right now is that people are very hyper aware of any kind of vehicle that looks like law enforcement, that might look like ICE. And they want to alert their community, rightfully so, right? They're trying to protect each other. But we want to also remind people to, if you see something, take some videos, take some pictures. If you're going to upload it, make sure there's a timestamp, clear location, all of that. And try to confirm it before you upload anything, because it does cause a lot of panic and a lot of fear. And then I'm also concerned, people that don't like us, that might also just be doing that to cause more fear and panic in our community. So the way that we protect ourselves is by trying to be as accurate as possible when we upload things. And again, knowing our rights.
Yeah, that's one thing that's frustrating about how our society has been so stuck on engagement and just getting insights and views and clicks. Because I know there was, somebody made their own video. I didn't see any ICE trucks in their video. I didn't see any officers. Just saw them kind of repeating what we had heard. But people went to check it out, even a priest, and there was no there. And that's just really, frankly, a waste of our time, your time, to be calling all these people, asking to verify, and them sending a priest out there to go look is not the best use of their time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. So what are some general know your rights information that people should know?
It's important to know the difference between an administrative warrant and a judicial warrant if ICE comes to your house. So make sure that if they come to your house, you don't have to open the door unless they have a warrant that is signed by a judge. And then if it is signed by a judge, they will have the name of the person that they're looking for. So that means that is the person they're looking for. Nobody else from the household or, whatever establishment it is has to walk out. If you do have some kind of, interaction with ICE or something like that, you have the right to remain silent. Don't answer questions about where you were born, stuff like that. And you have the right to an attorney. I understand that immigration attorneys are expensive, but that's also what's going to help us fight any kind of deportation process. So again, you have the right to remain silent. You don't have to answer any questions. And then also make sure that you know what you're signing if they're asking you to sign something. Because sometimes you could be potentially signing away your rights to an attorney, or you could also be signing away, or you're signing your voluntary departure, which essentially is allowing them to deport you. So again, know your rights, which is remain silent, don't sign anything you don't understand, and ask for an attorney.
Don't open the door.
Yes, don't open the door.
Don't open the door to strangers.
Yes, if they come to your house, don't open the door. And if it is an agent, they need a warrant signed by a judge to be able to come in. If they don't have it, you don't have to open the door.
Yeah. All right. How are you feeling after that conversation? Stress?
It's stressful for sure, but like you said, an organized community is a safe community.